Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 63. It's Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. It's the first time you're joining the show. Glad to have you here. If you're returning from another episode or some other content, glad to see you coming back to get your fix of cyber threat intel. Now, if you need a snack or a drink to get you through the content, make sure you run and go do that. And also, if you want to see any of the articles that we cover in the episodes or some other articles that we add that we don't necessarily have time to get to in the episodes, then head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com, and you can find all that information on there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and flip on over to my screen and hop into the content. All right, so first article, Neiman Marcus data breach, 31 million email addresses found exposed. A May 2024 data breach disclosed by American luxury dealer and department store chain Neiman Marcus last month has exposed more than 31 million customer email addresses, according to Have It Been Pwned founder Troy Hunt, who analyzed the stolen data. And if you aren't familiar with the Neiman Marcus situation and what happened in that, we did cover that on this show. So you can definitely go back and look at some of the previous episodes. But also, that's a great reason why you want to watch Cyber Threat Intel, because we do cover these things as they unfold and kind of the aftermath and everything about these different situations. All right, back to the article here. Hunt's findings come after the company filed a breach notification with the Office of the Maine Attorney General, stating that the breach only impacted 64,472 people. It's quite a ways from 31 million. In a separate incident notification published on its website, Neiman Marcus revealed that the data exposed in the attack included names, contact information, so things like email and postal addresses and phone numbers, dates of birth, gift card info, transaction data, partial credit card data, or partial credit card without expiration dates or CVVs, so the verification numbers, and social security numbers, and employee identification numbers. So definitely some sensitive information in there. It says, in June, after it first disclosed a data breach, Neiman Marcus also linked the incident to the Snowflake data theft attacks in a statement to Bleeping Computer. If you don't know about the Snowflake situation, we covered that on this show as well. So again, another reason why you want to watch the show is so you can stay current with everything that's going on. The disclosure and the data breach notifications came after a threat actor using the Spider handle put Neiman Marcus data up for sale in a hacking forum, asking $150,000 for 12 million gift card numbers, 70 million transactions with full customer details, and 6 billion rows of customer shopping records, store information, and employee data. Again, sensitive information that you really wouldn't want leaked out there. And they go ahead and give a screenshot of the forum posting. While the threat actor first said the company refused to pay an extortion demand, it subsequently took down the forum post and the data sample, hinting that the company may have begun negotiating. So this is one of those things that we are, really kind of looking at in the cybersecurity world, and in this world where these companies are getting breached and hacked and facing ransomware attacks and all these different things, or facing situations where they're being basically blackmailed into paying a ransom. And it's just a very interesting situation as far as, do you pay? What is your threshold? Are you willing to pay? We've seen some countries, and we've talked about this before on the show, that some countries are actually looking at or implementing bans on making ransom payments. And that's in an effort to really slow down these groups and kind of take away their funding source. If you think about it, a lot of these groups act like businesses. So they need money just like anybody else in order to continue their efforts. They need money to get their AWS infrastructure or their cloud infrastructure, whatever they're using, and to continue their efforts to do research, to just have their malicious threat actors eat and do whatever, right? Do just the normal kind of things. And if you don't pay them, eventually they're going to run out of money and they're not going to be able to do anything. And so that's kind of the thought process a lot of times with not allowing ransom payments, is because you're just kind of fueling the fire as far as these groups being able to continue. Now, with this one in particular, obviously the really interesting thing is the 64,000 people that they announced were impacted, when in fact, apparently it could be 31 million customers that were impacted. I think that is quite the that's quite the difference, right, in numbers. And I almost wonder if they are not considering these email addresses, these 31 email addresses, as, sensitively impacted or something like that. So they're saying, well, maybe, but we don't really consider that part of this. We don't really consider that to be sensitive enough to make the notification. I'd really be interested just to hear their kind of train of thought if they indeed know that there's 31 million customers that were impacted, because that certainly could be an issue. In the United States, especially if you are a public company, that's a massive issue if you're trying to cover up a situation. We've seen companies and executives and security leaders and company leaders and all kinds of people that have been involved in situations like that, especially even with cyber breaches, not just in the company in general. And we've seen them have to answer to that. And in some cases, they've actually been penalized or had to face justice and get prison time or things like that, where, that's not favorable. But that's certainly something that you, as a cybersecurity professional, if you're trying to work in this career field or you're already working in this career field, you have to be really careful about, because the level of accountability is definitely going up. There's more expectation that you're going to be held accountable for your efforts. And so this is also why in this career field, if you are proposing solutions or trying to get things done to improve the security and you are facing resistance, or the requests are declined by your leadership or by your senior leaders, whoever's above you in your organization or controls the budget, that's kind of a saving yourself kind of situation, because you've proposed the solution, made a case about it, and essentially been rejected for that. So it's like, is it your fault? Well, no, because you requested the budget, you requested these things. So there's a lot of things going on right now in the cybersecurity career field and how that interacts with the business and who's ultimately responsible. Because responsibility does matter in situations where there's a breach. Next article, Philippine lawmakers grill health agency executive over breach affecting 42 million people. The government organization that manages the universal healthcare system of the Philippines is facing backlash from lawmakers after it failed to notify more than 42 million people that their health information was leaked during a ransomware attack last fall. Eldino Santos, Executive Vice President of the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, PhilHealth, testified at a hearing in the House of Representatives Committee on Appropriations on Monday. He confirmed that the organization has not provided notice about the data leak to each victim as legally required. That would be a no-no. That's not good. A lawyer at the hearing said PhilHealth needed to notify victims within 72 hours of the incident and tell them what data was stolen, how the breach occurred, what risks each individual faces, and how people can protect themselves. So this is one thing that we see a lot with different compliance regulations and requirements, is this idea of a timeline from when you know that there is an incident or there's a breach or something, and when you have to notify the people that are affected, whether that is your customer, if you're dealing in business-to-business operations, or if you have end consumers, just a regular person out there that buys your service or product. And so this is saying 72 hours is their requirement. You could see 24 hours, you could see 12 hours, you could see all kinds of different requirements, 5 days. Typically, you're not going to see like 6 months. because that would just be ridiculous. But usually it's somewhere in that ballpark as far as the requirement to notify people. Government-owned entity provides a national health insurance program for the country's 114 million citizens. In September 2023, the Medusa ransomware gang attacked the organization and caused weeks of outages. So 114 million people, that's quite a bit. In April, the government created a portal for those affected where people can enter a 12-digit identification number. That's the Filipino equivalent to a social security number to see if they've been impacted. So that's quite interesting, making kind of a self-service kind of situation where you can just go in there and check it. One of the questions that should be popping up your head is how accurate is that database or that portal? Do they in fact know, or are they just going to put all of those kind of social security numbers into that system and say, yeah, everybody's impacted? The site says 42 million and 89,693 million. 42 million. Wow. Yeah. 42,089 693 million people. That's a lot of people, and I'm not sure why they formatted it that way. Anyways, had information included in the 430 gigabytes stolen by the ransomware gang. So many people impacted by this. And that's one of the unfortunate things as a consumer is a lot of cases when you give information to companies, you're kind of at the mercy of them to do the right thing as far as security and maintain their security posture, improve their security program. And, that's why you have to be careful with who you do business with too. Because if you don't trust the company, you have to think about the repercussions of giving them your data. If they're not going to secure it and you're just going to give it to them, then you have to expect that they're probably going to get breached at some point if they haven't already been. So I think that customer trust is certainly one of those things that is increasing as far as a requirement and how important that is. And we see that all the time. If companies have massive breaches, they don't do anything about it, or it's clearly their fault, we see companies stop their business with those companies, and they kind of move on. They go to other companies, other providers, because it's just not worth the risk. So that's why you have to be very careful. You have to make good responses. When you identify incidents, you have to do due diligence and do care for your program. Maintain things, improve them. Next article, Russia forces Apple to remove dozens of VPN apps from App Store. Apple's removed 25 virtual private network or VPN apps from the Russian App Store at the request of Roskomnadzor. I'm not sure if that's how you say it. Somebody let me know if that's right or not. Russia's telecommunications watchdog. That name confirmed to Interfax that the order targets multiple apps, including NordVPN, Proton VPN, Red Shield VPN, Planet VPN, Hide My Name VPN, LaVPN, and PIA VPN, used to gain access to content tagged as illegal in Russia. So this is interesting too. This whole idea of countries kind of censoring or controlling what kind of information that you can access. We know that there's a lot of countries out there in certain parts of the world that are notorious for doing this. And a lot of them are in that kind of region, but censoring what people can access. And then so by doing this, by taking down VPNs, if you don't know what a VPN is, basically the idea is that you connect to some server that's allowed for you to connect to. That server then essentially will send that data to other servers, kind of acting as a proxy, and then allow you to access other content. A lot of cases, that's how it is. A VPN could also be an appliance where you connect to it maybe in like a corporate network, and then that allows you access into that network. Or if you connect to a server in another, let's say another country, and that server is allowed, then that can then kind of obscure your location and make it appear essentially that your traffic is coming from one of these trusted or allowed places. So there's several different uses for VPNs. This one is basically for content access. So it's going to essentially make it look like you are logging in or accessing websites from another location outside of that country, and that allows you to actually see the data that is blocked otherwise. While the Russian telecom watchdog has been increasingly targeting VPN applications since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, this is a part of a broader and older effort to block access to such services. Again, we've seen countries do this. We've seen Russia do this. We've seen China do this. We've seen North Korea do this. All of these countries are very well known for doing this. Even though Putin signed a bill banning VPNs, proxies, and Tor into law in July 2017, the Russian authorities didn't try to enforce it until March 2019, when the Roskomnadzor notified 10 VPN providers that they were required to connect their systems to the Russian State Information System, the FGIS, which would ensure that users would be prevented from accessing blocked websites automatically. We've also seen a lot of these countries notoriously act as essentially a proxy where your traffic has to go through them so they can see everything that you're doing. And that also, from a privacy argument, is certainly concerning. But again, different countries operate in different ways. And as a professional or somebody that could be impacted by the differing laws of different countries, you have to be aware of that, and you have to make sure that you understand what laws are in place and what is allowed, what is not, because it could certainly get you into trouble. And for instance, if you're from the United States, I don't think you want to end up in a Russian prison. I'm just saying. But yeah, so it is interesting too. With Apple, I think it's pretty clear why they agreed to do this, because they don't want to violate the law. They want to continue to operate in Russia, so it would make sense to go ahead and do that, especially if it's not necessarily something that is ethically wrong, right? Like there's not anything necessarily wrong with blocking a VPN, but we know why they're doing it, in a sense to censor a lot of information that is that people are allowed to see. So, I guess that's kind of the result, though, of doing that, not necessarily the act of blocking the VPN. Next article, Supreme Court ruling threatens the framework of cybersecurity regulation. On June 28, 2024, the Supreme Court struck down a legal principle known as the Chevron Doctrine, or deference. This doctrine dates to a 1984 Supreme Court ruling, Chevron versus Natural Resource Defense Council, that allows federal agencies to use their own expertise to interpret ambiguities in the law. The latest SCOTUS ruling abandons the need for courts to show deference to agency expertise, overruling the 40-year-old practice. Courts no longer need to defer to the Chevron doctrine in cases that involve agency rulings on agency's own rules. So, cutting to the chase, here it says, if a business appeals an agency decision, courts need no longer defer to the agency's opinion on the matter. This could lead to more companies to appeal agency decisions and well-funded companies to treat U.S. regulations in the same way that they treat EU regulations, masses of paperwork, dozens of lawyers, and appeal after appeal. So the unfortunate thing is, when you get in situations like that, is that a lot of times with appeals and with decisions and everything like that, it doesn't all, if you go to do an appeal, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stop doing whatever it was until that final decision is made after the appeal and everything like that. Sometimes we'll see decisions get made. Somebody will make an appeal, a company will make an appeal, and then they will be able to reinstate whatever they were doing in the interim until that final decision is made. And so certainly if you have enough money and that's the situation, you can make a case ongoing for a long, long time to where it's just not feasible to continue the argument or continue the battle. So Quite interesting. Kulichenko goes further and says, if a court believes that an administrative rule is inconsistent with an implied purpose of the statute, the court may now simply invalidate the rule. SEC rules on cybersecurity and breach disclosure, or the proposed CISA's rules relating to critical national infrastructure drafted under CERCIA and many other rules and regulations may possibly be invalidated by court. So it's always interesting too, especially with technology, the idea that the court can make the decision on some of this stuff because, in a lot of cases, the court is not necessarily going to be very technically educated, at least to the extent of things like cybersecurity. And so one of the things that you have to do in those kind of cases is really break it down to the kind of core concept in an easy way to understand. That's also why we see a lot of this stuff at very broad kind of levels, because it has to go kind of at the conceptual level, so it's easier to understand in a lot of cases. But I think in general, this is going to be interesting how this kind of plays out because, again, it's kind of a controversial situation that that certainly could have some unintended repercussions that that we don't necessarily want. But especially in a time where cybersecurity regulation is kind of in this kind of gray area where it's like, do we need more? What kind do we need? How do we do this? How do we still get everybody on board? Because there's still a lot of unanswered questions in general and a lot of things that just haven't been worked out still for cybersecurity. And it's going to be a battle for quite a while for us to try to continue to get some of this stuff worked out and how we really need to operate to make sure things are secure. There's the proper regulations in place, and people are essentially doing the things that they should do. I think that's the biggest issue is people aren't always doing the things they should do, despite knowing that they should do it. So let's keep moving here. Next article: hacker uploads 10 billion passwords to Crimeform Report. The world's largest collection of stolen passwords has been uploaded to an infamous crime marketplace where cyber criminals trade such credentials, according to security researchers. Hacker using the name Obamacare has posted a database allegedly containing almost 10 billion unique passwords thought to have been collected from numerous data breaches and hacks across many years. If you're not familiar with what happens when data breaches take place, a lot of times these aggregate lists will show up and they can be used for other attacks. They can be used by penetration testers, by blue teamers or defenders of organizations. So there's a lot of use cases for these lists and how they actually get used. Containing what is said to be an astonishing 9,948,575,739 unique passwords, all in plain text format. The RockU 2024 compilation apparently comprises an earlier credentials database known as RockU 2021. RockU 2021, which featured 8.4 billion passwords, adding approximately 1.5 billion new passwords into the mix. These cover the period from 2021 through 2024, and it's been established that the latest credentials file contains entries from a total of 4,000 huge databases of stolen credentials covering at least 2 decades. So RockU, that is kind of the common password list that a lot of people are familiar with that are in this space, in the ethical hacking space, or even in cybersecurity. If you've ever used something like Kali Linux, that's probably a familiar name to you. But certainly that's a lot of passwords. And that's a lot of passwords. Now, this is an important point here. Credential stuffing attacks remain one of the most common and successful methods of gaining initial access to services and systems for criminal and state-sponsored hackers and ransomware affiliates. So essentially what happens is attackers will use these lists to brute force passwords or guess passwords until they get in. And a lot of times with credential stuffing, they might take one password and try that with all the usernames that you have. Then they'll go to another password, go through all the usernames with that password and try that password and just keep this process going until they get in, so that they don't, in some cases, they don't want to cause suspicion or alert people, but obviously a lot of failed logins is going to alert people. But if you spread it over a long period of time and people are reusing their passwords, it can be an effective and easy method to get in. It says, there's a quote here, I think it comes a point where the magnitude of this aggregated data becomes next to useless due to its vast size, which is true. The more passwords in there, of course, you might have a match in there, but you have to go through the list. So if you have 1 billion passwords, it's going to take a while to get through that list if you don't get the password kind of relatively early on. What should you do in response to this huge leak of plain text password credentials? The article says, my advice is to take a good look at yourself and your attitude towards login security. It even talks about MFA on here, multi-factor authentication. And really, this is the argument here, is that a lot of the best good hygiene practices for passwords and for authentication and everything like that help to kind of eliminate this as a vulnerability. Because if you're putting in things like password history requirements, so you can't use the last so many passwords, last 24 passwords or something like that, that's certainly a good measure. Lockout procedures, so if you fail 5 times for logging in within a 15-minute period or a 60-minute period, to lock you out for a while or indefinitely until an administrator can unlock your account. Multi-factor authentication. There's all these things, how often you have to change your password. All of these measures are best practices. They should be commonplace everywhere. I'm sure there's organizations that it's not, and you might not be doing some or all of these, which is obviously a really bad situation. Having complex passwords, right? Like all of these things are so basic as far as cybersecurity goes and the things that you should have in place. But we've even seen major breaches, like the Snowflake situation. A lot of that has been tied to customers not requiring multi-factor authentication or their users not having that enabled. So again, we continue to see authentication attacks and vulnerabilities and reasons why attackers are able to get into these networks. And it's just because we're not doing best practices. We're not doing these fundamental things that are just an absolute at this point. If you're not doing them, you need to do them. They are just, it's like drinking water. You just have to drink water. Like you just have to do this stuff. There's no alternative to this. So definitely interesting article. So that is the last article for today's episode. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm John Good and I'm your host. This is episode number 63 and it is Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. Again, if you want to see all the articles that we covered, head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. You'll be able to find all that information there. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.